Ian, by the way, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I liked your video where you were, what's another word for sexily, so I don't have to use that word, eating a bowl of ice cream.
Oh. No,
Did everyone else see that? He was like looking at the camera, he was eyeballing the camera.
No, you didn't see my comment where I was like, dang, ice cream model over here. Like, what is this?
Who's this sexy bitch?
No, so a friend of mine is doing like custom pints, and I bought 2 of them, and they were fucking incredible.
I could tell by your eyes.
Yeah.
But I did not expect that. It was literally just me eating ice cream in front of a camera. Was not meant to be sexual.
No, it's you were looking. You were like, your camera was down here. You're just like
sensually.
It's exactly how that came across.
It was amazing.
Yes, it was wonderful.
I was not expecting it from Ian.
I mean, he's obviously the most sensual of any of us, so that
clearly
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Hello and welcome to episode 65 of the GameBrew podcast. I am your host, Ian the Count Richard, and today I'm joined by Allison Snuffleupagus Van de Vender.
Let's do the snuffle shuffle. Is that how he talks? It's kind of like that, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, he's got a nose.
Will Bert and Ernie Shell.
Oh, hey guys. Wait, that was more like Chef.
That was more like Chef and Kermit had a baby.
That was a bird.
And Dan Oscar the Grouch Rots.
I love trash.
On the first half of the podcast today, we'll be telling you about all the things that PC Gamer's Top 100 got right and got wrong. And in the second half, we'll discuss how dialogue can bring a video game to life or not. But first, it's time for a beer.
No, it's not.
What are we drinking
No,
this
it's
week?
not.
It's not time for a beer?
No, it's not time for a beer because we're having some conversation. So everybody, get out your robe, sit in your nice lounge chair.
All right, cigars optional or mandatory?
Cigars are
mandatory.
Yeah. So I'm upset that you don't.
I missed the memo.
Yeah, we're doing cigars because vaping is real dangerous, so...
Apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and cigars are better for you, so...
Yeah, they've been around longer, so they're more refined. They've worked out all the kinks.
So we're drinking some, since we're having such a classy conversation, we're drinking some Glenfiddich. No, there's no ch. It's Glenfiddich.
Really?
Scotch. Delicious Scotch whiskey.
I'm terrified of drinking this. I really am.
I'm not going to lie. When I first read this word, I didn't even bother figuring out how to pronounce it. I literally just sped through it as like Gryffindor whiskey.
Yeah, Gryffindor whiskey. But yeah,
Wait, you sniff it first?
So just a few things about Glenfiddich. It's owned and produced by William Grant & Sons in Dufftown, Scotland.
Scotland.
Yeah, and Glenfiddich means a Valley of the Deer in Gaelic, or Scottish Gaelic, which is why it's a deer on the logo. So, yeah, it's actually the world's best-selling single malt whiskey.
How about that?
So this
I
one,
didn't know that.
Yeah,
it's so happy to drink it.
There was so many pretty bottles of it when I went to go get it, by the way, like the large bottles, and they went to crazy expensive amounts, and I didn't understand why, but.
Well, with Scotch, it gets better with age, so it depends on how long it's been aged for. So, like the standard, which is the green one, which is I'm drinking, is a 12 year.
Yeah, 12 year.
You can go higher, but it is expensive.
Yeah, I think the 14 years like a $20 bump, and then after that, it gets a little bit more.
It gets pretty expensive.
You
What's
know
after
who
14,
else?
20 year?
You know what else gets better with age?
Me.
What?
Dan does.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
Oh, look how good he is. Look at him. He's great.
Yes, because I'm sitting down. You can only see the front of my face. That's why I look good. But every other part of me, I'm pudgy. I'm losing my hair.
You're the only one here without some form of like hair loss, other than Allison. But like you're the only male here without some form of like
you don't know. Maybe it's
minor hair loss.
What's happening?
It could be.
I think.
But yeah, it's good. How does everyone like it?
I mean, I love
It's delicious.
So
It's like drinking rusty nails because that's what Scotch is. So as
the
far
more
as you
it
can
tastes
enjoy
like
that,
the ground, the better it is. To
exactly.
be fair.
Yeah.
The more
Yeah.
it tastes, like the more your eyes water and your nostrils burn, the better tasting it is. Even if it doesn't taste good, that's how you know it's good.
so
To me,
Right.
yeah, sorry, Allison.
Oh no, it's fine. I was just gonna say. So I've never had Scotch. The guys might know that because I think I said it. But so this is the first I've ever had, and I think we'll hit it where it's like kind of metallic-y and very earthy. So I get that rusty nail idea.
Yep.
But it's also sweet. It's got like a weird
Yeah.
sweetness, and I wasn't
It does.
expecting that. I like that.
Do one of the things that you can do with Scotch and bourbons and things like that is you're supposed to put a little bit of water in it that kind of releases the flavor a little bit more. So if you do that, that might do a little bit, or do what I do, which is drink it with on the rocks, a little bit of ice in there, keeps it chilly.
I need an ice tray. Yeah. I don't have that.
Same. I was like, I'd really like an ice cube with this, but oh well.
There is, and all of our viewers need to go look this up. If you just hop on YouTube and search for how to drink whiskey like a sir. I don't remember the company that this guy works for, but he is hysterical and doesn't need to be. He shows you all the wrong ways to drink whiskey, and he's like super uptight about it, and he'll pour it the wrong way and just chuck it over his shoulder. Like $100 bottles of whiskey. He'll just chuck it, dump it on the floor because
like a
that's
waste.
not how you drink whiskey. But how to drink whiskey like a sir is both informative and hilarious.
Check it out. I'll try to remember to post a link to that in the show description. But for now, it's time to talk about what we've been playing this week. Allison, did you escape from your League of Legends closet?
I mean, since we're doing team practice, not really. I do play that every week. But I did play a little of Final Fantasy 14 because I'm trying to finish it.
I was going to ask. Okay, great. What else?
and then I played the demo, which actually it's on pause on the PlayStation behind me. I was playing the demo of Catherine Full Body.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice game.
It's a little etchy. Just so
Etchy?
everyone's very aware about
Etchy or edgy?
No, etchy. It's got very sexual tones to the game. I'm going to throw that out there. But I really love the art of it. And I love the idea that the games have, which is like taking a puzzle game and making it ironically dialogue heavy, and the cutscenes really are just like watching an anime, and things like that. And I just love the stylistic things they did to the art in the game. Like, it's really beautiful in a lot of ways. So yeah, fun little demos so far.
That's cool.
Nice.
Dan, what about you?
I'm still playing all the games I was playing before, so I'm nothing too crazy. But I did pick up Void Bastards on my Xbox, which is a roguelite, which is where every time you're like jumping from spaceship to spaceship trying to collect parts for your spaceship, which is like broken, but you're also a prisoner ship.
Yeah.
So it's full of a bunch of different prisoners that you are using to go through all these other ships, and like defeat enemies and collect items that you need to keep moving from ship to ship, like fuel and whatnot.
Right.
And probably the most interesting thing, though, is that each time that you play, like if you die, your next prisoner that you play has like a backstory and something. Like if you play someone who's a smoker, every once in a while you'll just cough, and that'll like alert enemies to your stuff, to your presence, and you might have less oxygen to use than somebody else.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which is kind of neat. But yeah, and you pick up new interesting guns and stuff like that, and things to do, because it's a roguelite, so you know it's got to do some changes.
It's
in
like
there, but
it's a
good.
first-person shooter roguelite.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. I think you'd like it.
It's got a really cool art aesthetic too, is what I was going to say. It's sort of got like this 2D, 3D thing, sort of like early 90s
like a
comic book looking. Yeah. Looking thing.
Yeah. It's pretty neat.
It is neat.
And I recommend it.
Recommended. It's got Dan Seals of recommendation. Dan, or like...
It's a stamp.
It's a stamp.
That was the sound. It's the
stamp of approval.
That's a very like squishy, wet stamp.
If you what's funny is if you combine Dan and stamp, you get damp. So that makes sense.
That's why it works. It's covered in ink.
Will, what have you been up to, buddy?
I'm still just RPG hopping back and forth. I'm in my busy season of marching band
RPGs.
Yes, marching band and RPGs. Weirdly, I do that every year, like, because the fall is just insane for any musician. And for some reason, like, my escape, I guess, is to pick up like a 40+ hour RPG.
Right.
And
like
in
this.
like what little spare time I have, like,
and dump it in.
Play that. Yeah. So I'm still between Legend of Dragoon and Final Fantasy VII, depending on whether I'm at the Switch or sitting here on this sweet $5 PlayStation I picked up from a yard sale.
Nice.
Is Legend of Dragoon holding up past the initial like nostalgia rush?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good. And I'm finally getting to a point where so this morning actually I was playing and I got to a point where new music hit. I was like, "Oh my god, thank God. I'm so tired of
the loop.
This like world map music that just like permeates the first several hours of the game." When I got to this new area, I was like, this is the best song ever. And I don't know if it is or not, but yeah, it's holding up. I mean, it definitely shows its age, and it definitely shows Sony's inexperience in JRPGs when they first went into this, because this was their first attempt. But nonetheless, it is good. It's a good overall experience.
So it was actually developed by a Sony?
If I am not mistaken, yeah. It was Sony's first, maybe Sony Interactive. I forget what they called that portion of it.
It was Sony Computer Entertainment was the publisher.
It was their first foray into...
SCE Japan Studio.
They wanted a piece of the Square Enix, or excuse me, at that time it was just Square, of the Square Pie.
Yeah, the Square Pie.
The Square Pie. But yeah, it's good. Good music. Now that there's new stuff, good gameplay, really good story, but I also am one to latch on to those old JRPG type stories. So
same.
Yeah, I love it.
Nice.
It's great. The graphics are god awful. I don't know how Sony with their budget got that wrong. I feel like they tried to make the graphics as good as they could, like as lifelike as they could for that platform, but they overshot so much when they should have just kept it simple and maybe a little blockier and maybe a little bit more cartoony.
Yeah.
Because there are some things in that game that are really hard to interact with and even notice to begin with, because there's so much going on in a bad way.
But at the time, I mean, like, it was probably like, oh my god, this is so good. Look how lifelike these humans look. And
I mean, maybe
it's just that now, since we have better shading stuff, but
see, I feel like Final Fantasy VII, like, is graphically, like, quote in quotes, better or more easily interpreted than this game, because there's so many jagged edges. Like, the anti-aliasing was not a thing on the PS1.
I definitely think that, like, Legend of the Dragoon suffered from the palette, because it was all very dark. So, like, the character edging onto the background edging a lot of the time was just soft and hard to read what's what. That's where I think they failed more than anything. Although the sprites themselves I thought were really good, and for that time period, really killer. Definitely thought that the color palette suffered.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Ian, what have you been playing, bud?
I have been playing... Okay, so since the last time I was on the podcast, I finished Prey.
Here's the sound.
I've also been playing some Borderlands 3. I pushed my Smash level up over 5 million.
Wow.
Still not in Elite Smash.
What that means for those who don't play Smash is that Ian's a giant loser.
Oh, no.
Spends a lot of time by himself playing Smash.
I've also been putting a lot of time into Blasphemous. Does anybody know what this game is?
No.
Yes, it looks
Describe it.
So
like I would hate it, but it still looks so cool.
You would definitively hate this game, Will. So this is a 2D tough as nails Metroidvania-ish kind of game, but the whole thing is like the whole aesthetic is based around this religion that's very much about like blood and like not forgiveness but like atoning for your assumed sins. So it's got this like super dark Catholic aesthetic. You carry around a rosary and like a sword of thorns, and like some of the executions are like pretty freaking brutal. Which is
awesome because this is on Switch.
Which is all great because it's on Switch. But aside from that, it's just got like super tight controls, really good world design, like the world design, it reminds me a lot of that game that we don't talk about that I may have already said something about, in that like the geometry of the world makes sense but doesn't make sense. So like the mountains are underneath the beginning of the world, and you're like, whoa, mountains underneath something, but that's also a cool idea. And then, you know, there's like a cistern and a catacombs and it's really well designed space.
This looks
it's absurdly difficult, right?
Yeah,
like it's very unforgiving.
It is really hard. I'm actually on the edge of like, do I want to keep doing this? Is this worth continuing to do? I don't know, because it's hard.
That difficult?
It's just like it's less convenient than a Souls game.
Just looking at it is giving me nightmares. So
yeah.
It's brutal.
It is brutal, and it looks brutal, and that's one of the things that I actually liked about it, is that its aesthetic is very unique. I think
that's neat.
I like that they have that on the Switch, because that's very different.
Yeah, when I watched the previews for that, I remember noticing the art, and then they show like this big face. I guess it's a boss fight type thing on there, and it's visually unnerving in a way that, like, usually visuals don't bother me too much, even gore, but something about the textures and the way they interact, it's very visually uneasing.
Yeah. All right, topic 1 for today.
Best segue ever.
Best
Ian,
segue
you're supposed
ever.
to press the clutch before you transition. You don't just go to gear.
Today's first topic is that we wanted to talk about PC Gamer's top 100. So PC Gamer obviously put together this rather exhaustive and regularly updated, in fact, list of the top 100 PC games of all time. And we had to look through it. And in our expert opinions, it's not bad. It's actually pretty good.
It's okay.
There's a lot on there that I agree with, but there are some things that we thought would be worth talking about. So the way I wanted to talk to start this conversation was to ask each of the GameBrew cast here that we have what one game in their personal top 10 is, and then I will try to locate it on the list. So I'll probably have to delete some time here. But just in your top 10 PC games, like something you think should be in your top 10. We'll go to Allison first.
So for me, StarCraft 2 is in my top 10.
Ooh,
for sure.
That's interesting. I want to say I'm pretty sure that's on here, but low. No, it's not.
No, it is.
It is.
But I think it's too low. It's way too low. They have it. They have it at 55, which I also found interesting.
55.
That the time before this list, they had it at 70. So for some reason, they've moved it up.
It's moved
20
up
some spots, but I just don't. I don't get why it's so low when it's such a classic, really great game. I don't know. Maybe I'm too critical right now, but I feel like that is too low. I do.
Dan, what do you got?
Well, I mean, you guys know that one of my favorite games is Dead Cells.
Ooh.
That's like my one that I go back to all the time. It's not on there. I know
there.
it's not on there.
It's not.
It's not on there.
I'm a little surprised.
Well, I'm not, because it's a roguelite, and that's like... And
Spelunky's on there.
Yeah, but that was like that's on there because it was like one of the first roguelike, like kind of big games, you know? I feel like this list is a little roguelike light.
It is. It is a little roguelike.
If you catch my drift.
There aren't a lot of them on there. In fact, I want to say that Spelunky is maybe one of the only ones that is on there.
Yeah,
but there's also like 7 ASCII games. That's an exaggeration, but there's like a bunch of ASCII games, which I'm like, okay, guys.
Not sure I appreciate the way that you're saying that. Will.
What game have I played more than any other game?
Yeah, Counter-Strike.
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 Yep.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's in the 30s on here.
It is. You know, I saw that game and went, oh, Will. I relate that game to you.
That's why. Because
30,
he's still around.
38.
It was as with a lot of these games on here, it was groundbreaking. I think it deserves to be on there, even though I don't play a lot anymore because I don't like getting yelled at or my mother insulted. But, I mean, it's groundbreaking. It's a great game. It, not single-handedly, but it played a huge role in getting esports, popularized. And
that's true. That's interesting. Well, one of the things that I was thinking about while I was going through the list as a whole is that, to me, my impression was that these games are rated in their current enjoyability to play, not necessarily by the impact that they've had on the PC gaming community or on the PC gaming landscape, which I think is an important distinction. one of the other things that I was really actually happy to see while I was going through this is like there are so many great games that I haven't played yet. I got to go get all these games.
Yeah, I felt that way too.
I was really happy that Alien Isolation was on there too.
And so high, isn't it like 19 or something?
It was really high.
It's 23rd, but it was 15 the last time they did it. It's a great game. It's got amazing sound design. It's still like terrifying to play, and it's just the whole thing is very good.
What about Alien Isolation makes it better than World of Warcraft?
Because there's a story and you don't have to talk to anybody or have friends to be able to play it.
So,
I mean,
I thought World of Warcraft's placement was interesting, and it made me wonder if, because like you said, it was more about like the current playability. It made me wonder if it wasn't released so close to the Classic drop, because this list was released like I think 2 days after Classic came out.
Interesting.
If it gave the time for them to rewrite it after Classic has gone through and more people are playing it and more people are kind of buzzed and interested on it, if the classification wouldn't have been higher on WoW. Because I do think it fell off, and I don't think people played it like they used to. And then Classic came out and it got this like revival.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you feel like the classic version of World of Warcraft is better than the current edition with all the expansions?
Yeah, I do.
Why?
So it's the reason I stopped playing WoW was the things that they added destroyed the world and destroyed the core game in a lot lot of ways.
Are you talking about Kata?
Literally.
Or are you talking about like
Kata and like everything after Kata? I mean, everything they did to the game just broke apart what I found, at least personally, like beautiful about the game. I couldn't be different from the priest beside me. I had to be the exact same. I had to get the exact same gear, or I wasn't nobody would put me in a dungeon in a raid, because there was a set idea of what perfect was in the game for your class. I hated that. When it first came out, you could jump into your talent tree and throw things in different places and be a different kind of priest, which if you played better physically, like knew how to play your class better and played to a certain style and put things in certain places, like you could be better than the person beside you who had better gear, just because you were physically better at your class and knew how to do some things that were quirky and different. So it's stuff like that that really got destroyed in the game to simplify it for new players versus making it more interesting for the older players. So coming back to Classic, I know I did, and clearly by the way that Classic was received and how the servers acted, shocking, it was well received and people wanted that.
They were Classic servers.
Yeah and it's a hell of a grind, and like a lot of things are negative about it, but like I wanted that game back. So I know there's lots of people out there.
One more question on this World of Warcraft thing, and then we're gonna let it go. Well, actually, two more questions. Number one, for the Final Fantasy 14, you're also playing that right now. Would you put the classic World of Warcraft better than new Final Fantasy 14?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I don't think 14 is that awesome, to be honest.
So just for comparison's sake, sorry, World of Warcraft was at like 80 something, and Final Fantasy 14 is at 28. On the top.
That surprises me.
Well, it doesn't surprise me because I have friends who play Final Fantasy 14, and there's a lot of story things that, like, because there is a story for Final Fantasy 14, and there's a story for World of Warcraft too. But what Allison was just saying is like, it didn't really matter. It was more about like the stuff that she was doing as her character and that social aspect of it that really brought her in. Or am I mistaken in saying that, Allison?
Yeah, the problem with 14 for me is no end game, really, where World of Warcraft had that. And that's why I find Final Fantasy 14 doesn't have longevity for me. Although I like getting to the end, then I'm done. Like once I max my class, like whatever. Whereas World of Warcraft, I was interested in continuing the content at the end. There was more things for me to do. I could do pets. I could do this. I could do that. Where in 14, it was just kind of like PvP, and that was it. And it got disinteresting. And so I feel like WoW is a better game overall with a better longevity play experience. So I'm very shocked in the positioning there.
I also just want to take a second to note that it seemed like those were maybe the only 2 MMOs on the list. Which for
I think that's right.
For
Makes
a
sense.
genre that sort of dominates so much of the discussion about PC gaming, it's not really reflective of the actual so many different types of games that are out there for PC gaming.
Well, there was a lot of on that list. Battle Royales.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Fortnite was on there.
So I didn't even pay attention to these. So go ahead. Apex was on there.
Apex Legends was on there. Fortnite was on there. We had some Overwatch that was on there, which that's not really a battle royale, but I don't know. It holds the same kind of audience, even though it's like the team shooters. Like there's like League of Legends and Overwatch and Fortnite and Apex Legends, basically the Twitch heavy watcher games.
Twitch bros.
Yeah,
and
like
bros.
where everyone's streaming them all the time. And you could go anywhere and watch somebody playing it.
Dan, do you feel like the battle royales are overrepresented as good games in there?
No, I don't think they're overrepresented because so there's a few reasons. Apex Legends is on there. I'm trying to find exactly where it is on the list.
It's pretty high. I want to say it's in the 20s or the 30s somewhere.
I think so. I think Apex Legends is higher than Fortnite.
It is.
And that makes sense to me because Apex Legends is like a really balanced
24.
game.
Apex is 24.
Yeah.
Fortnite is like 34 or something like that.
Yeah. And, because Apex is really balanced, which is great, and they don't add a whole lot. They haven't been adding a whole lot, but it still kind of keeps it kind of keeps itself moving. Kind of like the same way PUBG does is because it's just like, there's people who really like playing this game and, are good at this game. Whereas Fortnite is on the list and is a little bit lower, but also it's kind of like this Frankenstein of just content where all they do is they just keep putting things into it and changing things. So it's like not the same game anymore. It's like the Fortnite that people played a year ago is a different Fortnite from the Fortnite that exists right now.
Yeah.
So and that's kind of why they put it on the list too, is because it's like it's so changed from what it was, and like the things they keep adding to it make it a little bit more interesting for like they're going to add bots to it soon, which is going to be interesting too.
Was there anything that people felt like was just way too high and stood out to them, and they were kind of confused why it was somewhere?
Slay the Spire.
That was
to be
really
clear,
high.
I love Slay the Spire. I've played a lot of Slay the Spire on the Switch, not on the PC, to be fair. But that's neither here nor there in terms of this game. I just don't understand. I don't understand why it's that high. The game is
number 4
almost,
for the
almost
listeners,
infinitely replayable. But like honestly, the art style doesn't really speak to me. There's no story. Like the items and the interactability of the items is incredible, and the different things you can do with each of the classes are really cool. But I don't think that to me doesn't stand up to even something like a Rocket League, where like you could invest enough time in Rocket League, and Rocket League is just like infinitely rewarding. I don't know. Like I played enough Slay the Spire and I'm good with it. I feel all right about it. And Rocket League, I feel like I could play forever. Anybody else have things that were too high?
Hitman 2 for me. I thought that was really high. I don't know.
I love Hitman 2.
Hitman is such a
Top
hit or
10
miss
though?
game.
Love it.
Top 10? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because it has the things that people like, which is different ways to play something. Like it has the replayability because there's so many different ways for you to do things. But also, it has like the weird, it's like serious, but there's also comedy elements to it.
It's so goofy now. Hitman is so goofy now. If it was ever serious, it is much more goofy than it used to be.
Kerbal Space Program was too high for me. Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
That was interesting. No, you're right. That was
Kerbal was just
Kerbal Space Program.
Yeah, Kerbal, whatever. I hate that game.
I'm so happy that Kerbal Space Program made the top 20.
There cannot be that many people. Like the fun factor for this game. Like I'm a fun dude. This is not a fun game.
You gotta bring your own fun to it. No, the thing with Kerbal Space Program You have never set foot on the moon. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So the thing about Kerbal Space Program.
If I have to bring my own fun, there is something like that's like the equivalent of scanning and bagging your own groceries at the damn grocery store. That is not my job. It's their job to program the fun in.
No. So I think we like fundamentally disagree about what kind of game Kerbal Space Program is, because you just described it as bagging groceries. And bagging groceries is like you have a certain task that you need to accomplish. That to me is like Borderlands 3. Kerbal Space Program is like fucking Legos, man. That's why it's great. They said, here's all these Legos, do what you want with them. There's space out there if you want it. Go get it.
So the last question I had to bring it back from like a crazy argument was there anything on the list you saw that made you want to play something new you've never heard of or didn't consider before? Because I had a couple for me.
You guys talk about it all the time, but the What Remains of Edith Finch was still
that one sounded good.
And that one's always been one that's kind of interesting to me. That and Return of the Obra Dinn. Those are two like real interesting, again, walking simulator type games, but I really want to play those.
Sorry, go.
Warframe for me, which I've played very little, but had a tough time getting into for whatever reason, but it's so high on the list. It's 27. There has to be something there to that. Although I say that and then Kerbal Space Program's on the damn thing. So it could be terrible, but like the audience for that game seems to be growing, and they're still doing expansions for it and updates, still creating content for it. So there's got to be something there to it, and I like shooters. So
I found some of like the like grand strategy or large strategy things, like the Anno 1800. I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting, or like the Total War games that are on this list. I was like, I should really play some of those. I bet I would get into it.
Will, you should talk to Curious, who we had on the podcast about Warframe, because that's one of his main games.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool.
But I
DM me, bro.
Baba Is You.
Yes.
That one really caught me. I was like, I have no idea what this is, but I desperately want to try it now. So that one looked really cool.
But hey, Will, how do you feel about Divinity Original Sin 2 being like
number one
like
game? That does not surprise me. I mean, that game that is like, that's got to be the closest to perfection that anybody can get. I mean, those people just, what studio is that? They just know what the hell they're doing. They know how to design a game. It's just like your grandma's insert favorite dish here, whatever, spaghetti.
Chicken.
Spaghetti.
Larian Studios. Is the
Larian Studios. Those people know what the hell they are doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right. Well, people out there in the GameBrew verse, if you think there are things that were left off the list or things that were too low or too high, definitely let us know by hitting us up on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the GameBrew. But we're going to take a quick break right now. We'll be right back. It's a break. Hey, everybody. Real quick, since it's the break, just wanted to pop in and say thank you for listening to the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can always find us on your favorite podcasting app, on Facebook, on Instagram, or on Twitter if you're looking for the podcast. Or if you wanted to get a little bit more social, you can always come hang out with us in our Discord at bit.ly/discobrew. We also love it when you send us topics, so you can do that right over at thegamebrew@gmail.com. Anyway, once again, appreciate you listening to the show, and we'll get back to it. Hello and welcome back to the second half of the GameBrew podcast. We are sitting here enjoying some very classy Scotch whiskey.
It's very classy Scotch whiskey.
We shouldn't do this
Scotch.
again. We should not drink Scotch on the podcast again because I am drunk.
It's
toasted.
hard.
You are a toasted boy.
Additionally,
I'm the toasty host.
I stick with my kerosene smell. What? It's really putting me off. I can't get past the smell. I like earthy things.
So don't smell it.
I can't help it. I put it to my mouth and it goes
You could literally run a vehicle or some sort of small lawn equipment engine with this stuff.
Well, that's the peatiness of it, which is where whenever you're like smelling it and tasting it, that like again I call it like it tastes like the ground, but that kind of peat flavor, PEET, is kind of what brings out the goodness of it.
But here's the thing. I used to eat
Thank
potting
God it's
soil.
not PETE.
I used to eat potting soil as a child. I liked it. It's really good.
That's all right. Some kids ate sand, some ate dirt.
Right.
You ate the higher level of that.
Right, the stuff that had chemicals in it that probably damaged my brain and is why
like that,
now the way I am.
It's like that meme with like the different levels of brain expansion and the one with potting soil.
Yes. And by the way, the Birdie Bot's every flavor of bean dirt flavor tastes exactly like potting soil, and it's wonderful.
From someone who ate potting soil. There you have it, folks.
I literally take those from people when they get them and hoard them and eat them all.
I never ate
GameBrew
anything.
fact.
The things
like
that you want to be out in the world and the things that you don't want to be out in the world, I just don't understand.
Yeah, it's how I edit myself. It's a weird
Was it
process.
at least like brand name?
I don't remember. It was whatever my mom got, and she would like do the plants, and I would sneak it because like
I hope it was like Miracle Grow and not some sort of like weird imported
does
crap.
it matter? It was still potting soil.
Will's concern is that she's eating the good potting soil. I love it.
But what I was going to say is I loved that, and I don't get peatiness from this, I guess. And I would appreciate
you would know.
that. Yeah, I would know. Like I love mushrooms for that reason, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
right,
I really made us go high left.
Here, I'll do the segue for you. You know, that was an interesting dialogue that we just had about Allison eating.
That was an interesting dialogue,
I guess
Dan.
so.
But speaking of dialogue,
What made that dialogue interesting, Dan?
What made that dialogue? You know what I think it was? The thing about dialogue is that I think dialogue is good when the dialogue and the production, like the acting of that dialogue, matches the aesthetic of whatever world you're trying to make.
I would agree with that.
I think that's what makes good dialogue.
That's what makes it believable, I think.
That's what makes it, believable and acceptable and like it's aimed in the right way. I was thinking about this and like there are games where dialogue is really good and I really like it, and there are games where I'm just like, just let me read the subtitles because this shit is insufferable. Case in point, The Witcher 3. Could not listen to them blathering on about anything. And it's everyone. It's the Firewatch, it's Claptrap is the person I like the most.
you're
Wrong.
You're talking about the wrong game, buddy.
What did I
You
say?
said Witcher 3.
Witcher 3.
You said The Witcher
and
3.
Borderlands 3. Borderlands 3 I can't stand.
Ooh,
Witcher
okay.
3 is great.
Yeah,
but
I was
Borderlands
really
3, like,
confused.
the only person that I can listen to is Claptrap. The Witcher, I could listen to anybody.
I would disagree with you on that because I find the interactions between the characters in Borderlands 3 a bit endearing, just the goofiness of it and like some of the characters, because there is some depth to it. I don't know how far into the game you are, but like it does build depth, like even though it's goofy and silly. And again, that's kind of what makes good dialogue is like, does it further the story of what you're doing, especially in a game where you don't necessarily get choices in what's happening, but it's just trying to tell a story.
Yeah.
And I think that builds over time with Borderlands 3. It starts out like, oh yeah, it's silly and goofy and look at all these quips that they have. And open, like whenever all that kind of stuff happens, it's great. But it's also like later it means more.
Does dialogue have to be interactive to be good for you all? Do you have to have a choice in where that dialogue goes, or can you be a passive observer?
No. And in fact, I found that when I don't have a choice, actually I enjoy the dialogue better. And to respond to Dan's point about Borderlands, I think I've gotten to the thing where you're talking about, but no, there's like actual emotionally weight here. And I think there is emotional weight in like the writing, but I don't necessarily agree that it's pulled off in that game in a way that makes me feel good about it. Like everything else that happens in the Borderlands universe undermines that sense of weight and gravity and seriousness that they try to get at the later parts in the story. And to me, it doesn't, like, I'm tired of the goofy shit and the serious shit feels undermined by the, goofy shit I'm tired of. And so I'm totally disengaged by the time I got there.
Well, that's your opinion. It's okay to have opinions, even if they're wrong.
But something like Firewatch or What Remains of Edith Finch, or even somewhat silly things like the Stanley Parable, I think really had outstanding dialogue that fit the aesthetic of the game and the game's environment and what the game was trying to get at.
Yeah, and that's what the game is about. Like those games, like Firewatch, walking simulators in general, it's about the dialogue, because the gameplay isn't necessarily the interesting part of the game. Right. It's more about what you're experiencing and what the characters and the story is trying to portray. Like The Walking Dead, the Telltale game series, rest in peace. Is all about making decisions, but you also have to pay attention to what dialogue is happening and what characters want. You know, it's like, oh, Dan will remember that, you know, kind of stuff. Like Ian says, oh, I do. Yeah, it's like, oh, Ian's like, I don't like Borderlands 3. I'm sitting here with my eyes all squinty going, Dan will remember that.
No, I mean, it's true. It's like games where it's impactful what you say. Mm-hmm. I'm more bothered if the voice acting doesn't work, I guess, because I'm really invested in the story and I'm paying attention to things. But I feel like games that I'm thinking of where that matters, like Fable maybe and things like that, I've always thought it was pretty good. Because they're paying attention to that. But there are definitely some times where there's just like throwaway voice acting that
you chase chickens.
Yeah, it's just like even the simple characters. I don't know.
Stand there like some sort of lump.
Yeah, like that character. Did that character matter at all? No, that was an impactful character.
She's a little girl. Oh, chase chickens.
Yeah.
2 Point Hospital is another really good example of this, where the dialogue does not matter at all. It has no impact on anything in the game, but it's outstanding, and I love it. It's like all these like little radio quips and like goofy things going on in the background. It's,
you know, I don't have to. I appreciate it because it is more engrossing of an experience, but I don't have to have verbal dialogue.
Sure.
I can have written dialogue. I mean, to this day, my favorite story still has got to be To the Moon, and it's all written.
Yeah, it's all written.
And
that's interesting.
It's
do you feel like it's
dialogue.
Easier to pull off written dialogue than it is to pull off spoken dialogue?
I feel like it leaves it up to the imagination of the person doing it. But what made that so effective is, first of all, it's good writing. He did a good job with the words he chose for that. But the music added to the context of that and sort of affected how you read what you were reading at any given time. So the music played a lot of context clues into how you audiated that.
Mm-hmm. I always think about my really heavy blonde moment for a brunette, where I honestly thought there was audio, like voice acting in Final Fantasy VII, because I had created those characters so much that I was convinced that was happening. Although it had been a while since I played it, obviously. But when we talked about it, I was really taken aback when somebody said there was no dialogue. And I had to really go back and look at that. And that's kind of where the written, even though there wasn't people speaking it, I had definite characters in my head. And that's something when they did create voice acting for it, I felt good about what they did with the voice actors. Like they were about where they should be.
Advent Children? Or?
Like, yeah, Advent Children when they did that. I felt like, Sephiroth was broody enough for me and Cloud was whiny enough. And Yuffie, I wanted to smack Yuffie with a board over the face. Like that was the voice that I expected. Like that really was. By the way, did you guys know what's her face? Kim Possible did the voice of Yuffie?
No.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That's
yeah, she did, and she has no idea anything about the game, which is a little sad. She doesn't.
Well, that's also it's kind of like what in the original freaking Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah,
wasn't Kairi was
Hayden Panettiere.
Panettiere, yeah,
and Sora was Haley Joel Osment.
It's still Haley Joel Osment.
Is it really?
Yeah, yeah, he keeps doing it.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then Hayden Panettiere also did Until Dawn, which the acting in that game is what made it. It was solely about the voice acting and the acting of those characters. They were physically copied from those people, and that one obviously is just a heavy dialogue game, so it better have great dialogue. But it it lends to why that game was so good.
So one of the things with good dialogue, and I think a lot about the dialogue in games where it is written out. So like the Baldur's Gate series, Icewind Dale, all those like Black Isle games, because they have like characters and a narrative that they create. It's kind of like Zork, where it's like everything's written out. It's like they have a script that is written and like a story that is written so that you can get involved in it. It's less about like, again, like Borderlands, where it's like, here's the game, but there's also things in it, but there's dialogue to kind of further the stuff. Instead, it's like the dialogue and the story is what furthers you into the adventure.
Right.
Whereas the game is like cooperatively moving that dialogue forward.
Yeah. I also think that hacking games have kind of an interesting take on dialogue, because it's written dialogue, but it's written dialogue that is oftentimes like found dialogue or dialogue from a bunch of different viewpoints created by the same person. So Hacknet is a really good example of this, where you like dive into different people's email and read it and think about things from many different people's point of view. Or there's something that came out recently, or that's like still in development, but there's a free web version called War Dialer. Wardialer, I think I spelled that right. War Dialer. That also has some pretty interesting written dialogue. And
or
also,
like Her.
Oh, sorry.
Kind of like
What's
Her
that?
too.
Her?
Her is a game that's like that, but it's got video clips instead.
Her Story.
Her Story. That's it.
Her
Oh,
Story.
Her Story.
Yeah.
Oh,
Her is the movie with the AI that has Joaquin.
Her Story is a great example where they had to they must have had to like laser point that dialogue to be just vague
Real.
enough to and real, but also like not so descriptive. You know what I mean? What it must have taken to write that and to chop it into so many pieces. Just incredible work there.
Yeah. I also think about like dialogue in scary games, which I think is something that's not often thought about, because people are more interested in like jump factor and like getting spooked. But for me, if a horror story doesn't have a good dialogue or like text or audio, I am completely disinterested. Like I don't want a Five Nights at Freddy's. That's not my vibe, where it's just like a bunch of things jumping out at you mostly. I love a good plot that creates the creep factor, because I want to believe this whole world is real and I'm in it, and that's why it's so creepy. Like Silent Hill, Resident Evil does a good job, but
how did you feel about Doki
except
Doki?
for that one time?
Yeah, it's
except for that
hit or miss.
Except for that one time you were almost a Jill sandwich.
How did you feel about Doki Doki, Allison?
Doki, I haven't finished Doki Doki actually. So I can't say much about it. I should do that for Halloween. But like Fatal Frame, huge reason why I love Fatal Frame is A, the visual is gorgeous, but B, the story sucks me in. It's like in Fatal Frame 2, I think it's 2, where it's the twin girls. It might be 1. Sorry if I'm getting that mixed up. But the sister constantly just like talking behind me, or just saying things and them conversing back and forth when I'm just walking through a room. Like that was what progressed the story more for me. And so those things are really interesting, I think.
Do you guys remember the first game that had an impact on you where you really noticed the dialogue? Because back when we read stuff, I didn't
like spoken dialogue.
I didn't think of it as dialogue. The first time I noticed and thought, this is really good dialogue, and I'm sure it was in exactly those words in my brain. For me, I was at my buddy Tommy's house. I was upstairs. It was on one of those OG, one of the first edition like widescreen LED TVs that came out, or LCD TVs that came out, and it was Mass Effect. That was one of the very first times I thought, this is so cool, because the alien voices were really unique. They did a good job mixing those and making each one, each race a unique thing to listen to and entertaining to listen to. But I don't know. It was just something about that was really special. And that was the first time I ever took notice of the written part and the spoken part of a game.
I think for me, it would be something like Uncharted. where like that dialogue just jumped right out. It was the reason, the dialogue and the cutscenes were the reason to play that game.
It was like an Indiana Jones movie. You were watching an Indiana Jones movie, but also you were playing it.
But the writing and the acting of that dialogue was the same level, if not better than the most recent Indiana Jones movie, at least. Probably also Temple of Doom, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, Temple of Doom's terrible.
Yeah, you really did play that game to get to the next, like, when can I put the controller down?
Yeah.
The next time Nolan North's just like, oh, there's these beautiful women all around me. What am I gonna do? Can we talk about like bad, like universally bad dialogue? Like, you know, the all, it's become a meme, of course, but like the all your base are belong to us,
sure.
kind of stuff.
I think it's notable that Skyrim's dialogue is pretty bad.
Oh, it's terrible because it's like they just say things that aren't conversational. Just, oh, I used to be an adventurer like you until I took an arrow. And he's like, I didn't ask your fucking opinion, man. Thanks.
And yeah, right. So it's sort of like, it feels non sequitur, but it's also delivered in this like incredibly strange monotone where it's just flat the whole time.
Yeah. It's so weird. And like, just, when it doesn't just, there's no reason for it to be there.
It should be good. In a game like that, the dialogue should be outstanding, but that's not something that they nailed in Skyrim. They nailed a lot of things in Skyrim, but the dialogue is not one of them.
I don't know if this is true, but I found a thing from the original Resident Evil. Does anyone remember, I could totally see this being a thing, dialogue from, I guess, Wesker, maybe. It says, Jill, why don't you, the master of unlocking, take this lockpick? Like,
yeah, it's
like chopped up. Do you remember chopped up audio from that?
Yeah,
or dialogue
it's weird.
From that?
Like, and that's kind of why Resident Evil is like, it's interesting, but also it's like the dialogue was so oddly spaced. Like things just didn't make sense whenever they, like the Jill Sandwich line. It's like, yeah, you almost died. Oh, you were almost a Jill Sandwich. It's like, that's weird. Why would you say that right now? There's zombies.
Speaking of hokey, no, I know the worst. I hate it. Cannot stand it, but the games are so good. Metal Gear Solid.
Oh God,
I cannot stand those.
And you know what the worst part about it is that like, and they tried to do this seamlessly, but it was weird. It's whenever you'd like get the codec, and you'd go in and it'd be like, Snake, you have to press the action button to try and get up that ladder. And it's like, why is this man telling me to press a button whenever I'm going to use my hands and feet to climb this ladder?
Well, what's interesting about the Metal Gear Solid games is that that hokiness became a stylistic choice throughout the rest of them, right? Mm-hmm. And it's that hokiness that I actually like about the Metal Gear Solid games dialogue. What bothers me about Metal Gear Solid games dialogue is when there's like this giant diatribe about like fucking Greek philosophy and like a bunch of other people that I've never heard of before, because there's all this history and philosophy and backstory that I haven't paid attention to.
Right.
And that's frequent.
I definitely think like when I think of like really bad dialogue, I think of old games. I don't think it's as much of a problem now, although like I do think that the voice acting can bother me in a lot of things, but that happens in anime for me too, where I get what I want out of the Japanese one a lot of the time, and then when I hear it in the English versions, it's just not what I'm expecting. But like I remember this game I got that I was really excited about called like Chaos Wars. And there was a line and it was just like somebody said monsters. And then the character said, that's too bad. They're gone now. You smell good. And that was the whole sentence, like just one sentence that made no sense, where they were trying to connect like this guy was interested in this girl and also monsters. And it was just like this really weird interaction. And that one stands out to me. But also X-Men Arcade. Like, I mean, all the arcade games, I feel like, had this issue of like bad translations or just like cutty dialogue. And it was like X-Men, it just said X-Men, welcome to die. And I'm just like, okay, I guess that's the thing. But those are the two big ones that stand out to me from my childhood. But yeah, I don't know. Now it's more like the voiceovers that bother me than anything.
Dan, do you have one that you hate?
Any of that. Any of the things where it's just like, oh, you have to press double tap Z to do a barrel roll, Fox. It's like, dude, okay, I get it.
Just
but also
show me a pop-up.
Just show me a pop-up and I'll do it.
I think it's also interesting to note that there have been a couple of games, at least a couple of games that I have played that have really succeeded without any kind of dialogue whatsoever. So like a Hyper Light Drifter basically had no dialogue at all, just had like short animated cutscenes, and also Journey were really like games that like moved me or touched me or made me curious in a certain way without having to use any dialogue. And I thought that was pretty cool thing to do.
They touched you and made you curious. That's interesting.
Yes. All right. Sorry.
I just stumbled upon some things from Castlevania. Just get a silk bag from the graveyard. Duck to live longer. You now possess Dracula's rib. Don't look into the Death Star or you will die.
Wow.
When I was your age, women loved me. That's another one.
That's awkward.
I don't know. I think
Richard Patterson. That's the whiskey guy from the video. Richard Patterson. Richard Patterson.
3 hours later.
I think there's a reason visual novels are one of my favorite genres. That's all I'll say. Like I do like games without dialogue at all. Mm-hmm. But there better be damn good music. Like that's the kind of thing. I need something audio. I need something to give me the emotion of the moment. And dialogue is an easy way to do that. Music is a secondary way that can do that in a game for me. But if I don't have either, if I don't have text to read to create the drama or to create the scene that I have, or I don't have good music to back what I'm doing, I think I'm really disinterested in a game. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, visual novels will always be one of my favorites because I love a good story. I love characters. Ridiculous is fine. Serious is fine. Whatever. But I do find dialogue to be very important, but not necessary. But I do think it's the easiest way to make a game.
Yeah, to connect with people.
Yeah, if I have no connection to a game, I'm not playing it, I guess.
What about, real quick before we go, what about Journey? Total absence of dialogue, but there is amazing communication.
I haven't played it. I actually should probably. I know
like
Ian said it's really good.
The game itself is the dialogue because you have like this beeping sonar kind of communication thing for like a, hey, come here kind of thing. Hey, but like the whole game is a dialogue between you and the other player, but there's no text. You can't speak. Hey, the whole game is communication.
It would be interesting to see another title that is about nonverbal communication. That is about communication, but non-word, non-spoken communication.
Oh, they nailed that. They did so good on that.
You can talk, but use your hands.
Sign language.
Exactly.
ESL the game.
These are not spirit fingers. These are spirit fingers.
All right. I think that's where we're going to leave it tonight. Everybody's spirit fingers up.
Spirit fingers?
They can't see
And say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody. The GameBrew Extended Cinematic Universe, the GBECU.
Ooh, I like the GBECU. Wait a second. Which one of us is Robert Downey Jr. though?
Me. I'm kidding.
Will. Oh, I was going to say
Allison.
it's Will.
No, it's Allison. No, it's Allison.
Wait, I'm what?
Allison. It's a bold new move for his acting career as playing a woman.
Billionaire, philanthropist, playboy.
Yep.
That's me.
Yep. Check. You're right.